You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Hey everybody, Rick here. You've all heard me blathering on this year about my latest book, Cybersecurity First Principles, a reboot of strategy and tactics. Well, we've turned it into an on-demand course featuring me, yours truly, as the instructor. I highlight what I think are the follow-on strategies to pursue the absolute cybersecurity first principle, which is reduce the probability of material impact due to a cyber event in the next 3 to 5 years. The follow-on strategies include zero trust, automation, resilience, intrusion kill chain prevention, and risk forecasting. I think it's the perfect quick-hitting content for busy security leaders like you and me, and it's all available now. Check out www.n2k.com/First Principles Course, all one word. That's www.n2k.com/First Principles Course.
Struggling to secure on-prem apps with modern identity? Don't worry, you're not alone. Join industry leaders from Fortune 500 organizations to secure your apps on any cloud with any IDP, regardless of your environment's complexity. Meet Strata's identity orchestration platform, Mavericks. Say goodbye to the headaches of app refactoring and legacy tech debt. With identity orchestration, you can modernize legacy apps to use MFA or passwordless authentication in a few weeks, migrate from one IDP to another, and so much more without changing the app. No matter your IAM use case, Strata extends the value of your current identity investments. And the best part? You can try it for free today. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. Data brokers offer information on active U.S. military personnel. Current BlueNoroff activity, a new Gootloader variant, is active in the wild. Atlassian vulnerabilities are actively exploited. The prevalence of breaches, an update on a Barracuda vulnerability, Hacktivism in the cyber course of the Hamas-Israel war, bot hunting in Ukraine. Microsoft's Ann Johnson from Afternoon Cyber Tea speaks with Sharon Barber, Chief Information Officer at Lloyds Banking Group, about cyber trends in financial services. Ben Yelin looks at data brokers offering information on active U.S. military personnel. And election security is in the news. An off-year election is an election nonetheless. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. Sensitive personal information belonging to thousands of active-duty U.S. military personnel can be purchased for as little as 12 cents per record from online data brokers, researchers at Duke University have found. The information includes health data, financial data, location data, information about religious practices, and more. And yes, religious practices are indeed the sort of data that is recorded. Your religious affiliation, if any, is right there on your dog tags if you're in a U.S. service. The researchers note that the availability of such data poses national security risks, even though the data brokerage industry remains largely unregulated in the U.S. Information about service members can be useful to hostile intelligence services interested in building dossiers on potential targets for compromise, recruitment, or harassment. The researchers said, in short, an industry that builds and sells detailed profiles on Americans could be exploited by hostile actors to target military service members and veterans. As a subset of the U.S. population, many veterans often still know currently classified information, even if they are no longer active duty members of the military. Justin Sherman, a senior fellow at Duke's Sanford School of Public Policy, told CNN it was way too easy to obtain this data. A simple domain, 12 cents a service member, and no background checks on our purchases. If our research team, subject to university research ethics and privacy processes, could do this in an academic study, a foreign adversary could get data in a heartbeat to profile, blackmail, or target military personnel. So, if they could get it from Duke, it's a lead pipe cinch the girls and boys over in the Moscow Aquarium could do the same. We'll have comments from my Caveat co-host Ben Yelin on this story later in the show. Jamf has published a report on a new macOS malware strain attributed to North Korea's BlueNoroff threat actor. BlueNoroff is a suspected state-sponsored actor that focuses on cryptocurrency theft. Jamf says, the activity seen here greatly aligns with the activity we've seen from BlueNoroff in what Jamf Threat Labs tracks as the Rust Bucket campaign, where the actor reaches out to a target claiming to be interested in partnering with or offering them something beneficial under the disguise of an investor or headhunter. BlueNoroff often creates a domain that looks like it belongs to a legitimate crypto company in order to blend in with network activity. North Korea has long used cybercrime as a means of redressing economic shortfalls caused by international sanctions and the pariah state's own failed policies. If commerce isn't working for you, try theft. SEO poisoning is when a victim's search histories are used against them, and that seems to be the initial point of entry for a new Gootloader variant IBM's X-Force has discovered. The researchers call the malicious implant Gootbot and say it facilitates stealthy lateral movement and makes detection and blocking of Gootloader campaigns more difficult within enterprise environments. They describe Gootbot as a lightweight obfuscated PS script containing only a single C2 server. It's an alternative to other more familiar post-exploitation tools like Cobalt Strike. Once installed, Gootbot implants spread across an infected enterprise domain looking for domain controllers. X-Force says, at the time of writing, Gootbot implants maintain 0 AV detections on virus total, enabling the malware to spread stealthily. Rapid7 is tracking ongoing exploitation of a recently disclosed improper authorization vulnerability affecting Confluence Data Center and Confluence Server. The security firm says the vulnerability has been exploited in multiple customer environments, including for ransomware deployment. Rapid7 says the process execution chain, for the most part, is consistent across multiple environments, indicating possible mass exploitation of vulnerable internet-facing Atlassian Confluence servers. Atlassian issued patches for the flaws last week, urging customers to apply the fixes immediately. Armis has published a survey conducted by Vanson Bourne looking at cyber trends over the past year, finding that 61% of global organizations confirmed they had been breached at least once over the past 12 months, with 31% experiencing multiple breaches during the same period. The top countries with organizations most likely to report breaches were the United States, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. The researchers note, on an average business day, 55,686 physical and virtual assets are connected to organizational networks. Global respondents shared that only 60% of these assets are monitored, leaving 40% unmonitored. Researchers at Vectra AI have found a way to bypass a rule designed to detect exploitation of a vulnerability that affects Barracuda's email security gateways. The rule, which was developed by Proofpoint's emerging threats team, failed to alert on a specific proof-of-concept exploit despite successful delivery of the exploit payload. Proofpoint has since released a new rule that addresses Vectra AI's findings. The cyber attacks Israel has sustained during the present war with Hamas have for the most part not risen above nuisance-level hacktivism. A typical example is the defacement of the Maccabi Tel Aviv basketball team's website with the message, Allah's victory is near. Such hacktivism is likely to persist beyond whatever end the physical fighting reaches. SC Magazine inventories the kind of war-driven threats businesses in particular should be alert for. It's a familiar-looking list which includes DDoS attacks, disinformation and other influence operations, cyber espionage, data theft and doxing, and website defacements. The most consequential cyber attacks of the war so far have emanated from Iran, and the head of Israel's National Cyber Directorate, Gaby Portnoy, sees the prospect of an intensified Iranian campaign as his biggest worry. Portnoy told CNN, "Iran knows that they can act more freely in cyberspace than in the physical space. We are prepared for that as much as we can." Interfax Ukraine reports the SBU's tally of bot takedowns. Since the beginning of the current war in February of 2022, the Ukrainian Security Service says it's taken down 76 bot farms operating on Ukrainian territory and pushing pro-Russian narratives. SBU Cybersecurity Department head Ilya Vituik said, "This is no longer just about professional intelligence services. We have information that a number of educational institutions are already teaching the subjects of cyber attacks on civilian infrastructure. They want to increase the scale of attacks and the number of people who can do this professionally. By the way, they teach how to attack not only Ukrainian systems, but also partner countries. In other words, the Russians are looking at you too, collective West." The SBU thinks that students and criminals are prime recruits into the Russian cyber services and their auxiliaries. They've got the skills, and they're appropriately biddable. And finally, today is Election Day in the U.S. It's an off-year election and so attracts less attention than presidential or midterm voting, but the cybersecurity experts are nonetheless watching the conduct of voting. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is running an election operations center to help secure the vote. The agency said, "This elections operations center brings together federal partners, state and local election officials, and private sector election partners to share real-time threat information. CISA stands ready to provide technical security support to the election infrastructure community. We look forward to seeing any lessons learned." In the meantime, access management platform provider Serbi has released a study of social media and election security that assesses various platforms for their vulnerability to account takeover and the spread of disinformation. Compared to last year, platforms increased their use of multi-factor authentication, but enterprise-grade authentication and authorization, the study concluded, continue to lag. So, as CISA would say, shields up. Coming up after the break, Ben Yelin looks at data brokers offering information on active U.S. military personnel. Microsoft's Ann Johnson from the afternoon Cyber Tea podcast speaks with Sharon Barber, Chief Information Officer at Lloyds Banking Group, about cyber trends in financial services. Stay with us.
N2K has teamed up with AWS to bring you AWS in Orbit, a groundbreaking new series that explores the impact of space technology, cloud computing, and generative AI. Hi, I'm Maria Varmazes, and in this series, I speak with industry leaders to give you a nuanced understanding of how these technologies are revolutionizing sectors like sustainability, critical infrastructure, and cybersecurity. So if you're drawn to big ideas and are curious how space and cloud technologies are impacting life here on Earth, this series is for you. Follow the T- Space Daily podcast to catch every episode of AWS in Orbit and visit space.n2k.com/AWS to stay ahead of the curve.
Sysdig understands that for business innovating in the cloud, every second counts. The cloud has introduced a new world where attacks happen at warp speed. Sysdig strengthens cyber resilience by reducing the attack surface, detecting threats in real time, and accelerating incident response, all powered by runtime insights. Sysdig's platform correlates signals across cloud workloads, identities, and services to enable teams to prioritize risks and act decisively. Are you ready to secure every second? Visit sysdig.com/cyberwire to learn more. Sysdig, secure every second. This episode of the CyberWire is supported by Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Compiler comes to you from the makers of Command Line Heroes and is hosted by Angela Andrews and Brent Simoneau. You know, one of the things I love about Compiler is the way they address issues that we're all thinking about. In a recent episode called The Great Stack Debate, they debate whether a software stack is like an onion, a sheet cake, or lasagna. That's the kind of metaphor I can get behind. If you're like me, you don't have a lot of time, and so you want to have a show that is concise and respects your time, and Compiler does just that. I hope you will check it out. Listen to Compiler in your favorite podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. My thanks to Compiler for their support. Microsoft's Ann Johnson is host of the Afternoon Cyber Tea podcast right here on the CyberWire podcast network. In her most recent episode, she speaks with Sharon Barber, Chief Information Officer at Lloyds Banking Group, about cyber trends in financial services. Here's part of their conversation.
Today I'm joined by Sharon Barber, Chief Information Officer at Lloyds Banking Group. Sharon is responsible for group-wide IT service, cloud and traditional technology infrastructure, security and technology resilience at Lloyds. And prior to this, as Chief Resilience and Security Officer, Sharon headed up teams responsible for cyber, physical, and information security activities, along with sourcing, supply chain management, and divestments. As part of this role, Sharon led Lloyd's operational resilience strategy and implementation and the group's response to regulatory policy requirements. Sharon also led the group's incident response to the COVID-19 crisis. Sharon is co-chair of the UK National Cyber Advisory Board. That's a lot, Sharon. Do you expect to see more of that in the future? And do you think that more CISOs have ambitions to rise to the CIO role?
I'd like to think so. Maybe they don't all realize they have the ambition to do that. I think we should definitely talk about it more. And it does depend on your background and experience. So I think if the CISO is technical, which more and more is the case these days, and has either IT experience or work closely with the IT teams, then I think it's a great career path and opportunity, and people should start to consider it. And if you think in many areas, technology and security are very closely linked. Everything is digital and online, and so it is very similar. And the non-technical skills are very transferable, especially those leadership skills you need in security and managing stakeholders at executive and board levels, and then also building high-performing teams. So, so I definitely think it is a good transition, though I would say it's a different hat that you wear, no surprise. You go from setting the security standards, running the operations, and setting expectations and security being top priority to having to trade off the risks across the ecosystem. And it doesn't mean security isn't the top priority. It just means you have to think about it end-to-end on the risk side. But what I would say that has been great is that as a CIO with a security background, it gives you the experience and the mandate to drive security ownership right through the organization and ensure that security is considered at the outset rather than it's somebody else's job to consider.
Look, one of the reasons I love cyber, and I've been doing it forever, is it's a rapidly evolving industry. That rapid evolution, though, also requires constant innovation. Can you talk about your perspective on innovation in cyber?
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer that innovation is not just a nice to have, and it's critical for all of us to keep pace with the threat and stay ahead. And that's not just in cyber, that's in all of our businesses. What we need to do is individual firms and as industries, we need to be thirsty for new and innovative ideas. There are some great startup hotbeds here in London, but particularly in the US and Tel Aviv. We're trying to support the UK as much as we can. We're a founding partner of LORCA, the London Office of Cybersecurity Rapid Advancement. That's not easily slip off the tongue, but I think it's really important that we work together and we support the government's cybersecurity strategy. So that's a key one for us in the UK. And as you interact with these great startups, over the years, we've found some really useful technologies through these engagements, but it is wider than just, leading edge technologies. It's important to build a culture and build innovation into business as usual and what you do every day, making sure that your labs are building innovative ideas into their backlogs and strategies and not being afraid to fail as well. So it's very much a mindset. We have to think differently and ensure innovation is a core part of our business processes and not just something exciting done by a few people on the side.
You can hear the Afternoon Cyber Tea podcast hosted by Microsoft's Ann Johnson right here on the CyberWire Podcast Network. And joining me once again is Ben Yelin. He is from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security and also my co-host on the Caveat podcast. Hey, Ben.
Hello, Dave.
Interesting article from the folks at MIT Technology Review. This is written by Tate Ryan Mosley. And this is about how easy it is to buy data about U.S. military personnel from some of the online data brokers, folks that we certainly talk about a lot over on the Caveat podcast. What do you make of this, Ben?
So this is actually a pretty disturbing story. It comes from a study by Duke University. They approached 12 data brokers in the U.S. and asked basically what would be necessary to buy information on service members. They were looking for things like their names, home addresses, geolocation, net worth, even things as personal as religion, their children, and health conditions. And it turns out that these companies are not only able to sell this very sensitive data, but they are doing so on the cheap. So the study quotes as little as 12 cents per record. Data brokers in the U.S. are selling sensitive private data. There are many disturbing elements to the story. One is that these companies, these data brokers, have offered to sell the data with basically no vetting. And the Duke University researchers used email domains based in both the United States and in various Asian countries. And that didn't make a difference as to whether the brokers were willing to sell the records. Really, this is a story about the utter lack of regulation we have around data brokers. And this just might be a type of catalyst for our policymakers to get involved and to institute some type of protections. If you're a data broker, besides morality, what do you care if this data is getting sold and what it's being used for?
Well, presumably somewhere along the lines there was a EULA, right, where these service members agreed to having their data shared.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With whatever application they were using to share that data.
Right.
The EULA, I'm sure they read all 600 pages of it.
Of course, as we all do.
Yeah, exactly. Before I order my Dunkin' Donuts coffee, I just make sure that I go through the terms and conditions.
That's right.
But yeah, and this has become kind of a Wild West, unregulated field. And like I said, it's hard to blame the data brokers here because this is their industry. They're making money off of it.
Right. Not illegal.
It's not illegal. And yes, this Duke University study has now found the most sensitive group of individuals whose data is being stolen. All of us admire our servicemen and women. They are our best and brightest. And to see their data, especially their personal data, being used in this way, I think is very disturbing. So maybe this can help be a catalyst to institute a broad data privacy protection that requires the equivalent of some type of Fourth Amendment search if it's the government, or extra privacy protections if it's simply private industry, to obtain this data from data brokers. I think that's really the ultimate goal here, is to take this out of the Wild West of regulation and to bring it under a regime that is more protective of this sensitive data.
Yeah. Indeed, they reached out, or they, being MIT Technology Review, reached out to Senator Elizabeth Warren, who I think it's safe to say is a usual suspect when it comes to these sort of data privacy things.
Absolutely,
right?
Yep.
Right, but she also serves on the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. And she said that data brokers are selling sensitive information about service members and their families for nickels without considering the serious national security risks. This report makes clear that we need real guardrails to protect the personal data of service members, veterans, and their families. To what degree do you agree that this could pose a national security risk?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think there's always a risk that with this type of sensitive information, if it gets into the wrong hands, it could be used as a method to attack service members, especially if we're talking about geolocation data. So for things like attempts at terrorist attacks, I mean, this could be a weapon that's deployed. If you're thinking about terrorist organizations, this would be a cheap way for them to obtain data in ways that they previously just would not have been able to do.
Right.
I certainly think there is a risk out there. It's not a reason for any of us to panic, but because this data is so personal and so sensitive and it's targeting service members, I think there absolutely is that risk that it affects our national security.
Yeah. Another thing that this report highlights is that some of the brokers ask the researchers to sign non-disclosure agreements. So in other words, you're going to buy this data from us, but you can't tell anybody.
Yeah, that's something that's very interesting and disturbing to me. I think that was an interesting part of the study is that the Duke researchers weren't just passively observing how this industry works, but they were actively purchasing the data and kind of showing us, bearing to the rest of us who aren't familiar with the world of data brokers, how this all works. So the fact that they're trying to force them to agree to these NDAs, I think is really illuminating. I think that it kind of reveals a consciousness in some sense on the part of these companies that they are dealing with sensitive data and they are just trying to protect their own legal interests instead of actually wanting to solve the problem,
right?
Which is to institute more privacy protections. I definitely think that is a disturbing element to it. It's what one of the researchers called a veil of secrecy that data brokers are drawing around their practices.
Yeah, MIT also reached out to Senator Ron Wyden, another usual suspect.
Absolutely,
He said, not to sound like a broken record, but our country desperately needs a comprehensive consumer privacy law here to limit the collection, retention, and sale of sensitive personal information from the start. I feel like Senator Wyden could have that tattooed across his forehead.
I think so, yeah. That could be the outgoing message on his Senate office phone voicemail.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder if they're going to bring some of these representatives from some of these companies in for a good old-fashioned congressional grilling, maybe in front of the Armed Services Committee, and bring some service members who've had their data brokered, just like the study seems to indicate, and make a real show of it,
Good old-fashioned naming and shaming.
Absolutely. It's very effective. I mean, how do you think we got those tobacco companies finally? Right. Get them in front of there and shame them to their face.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, this is an article from MIT Technology Review written by Tate Ryan Mosley. It's titled, "It's Shockingly Easy to Buy Sensitive Data About U.S. Military Personnel." Ben Yelin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
When you think about email encryption, what comes to mind? If you picture clunky legacy portals and feelings of frustration and rage, then you haven't met Virtru. Virtru makes it easy to protect sensitive emails and files that leave your organization, strengthening compliance with regulations like ITAR and CMMC. It integrates seamlessly with your daily apps like Gmail, Outlook, and Zendesk. See why Virtru has 36 number one rankings on G2. Get up to 3 months free at virtru.com/cyberwire. That's virtru.com/cyberwire. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show is written by our editorial staff. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpe, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.